of the Buddha's first teaching when he taught his first disciples. It is a work day. Unfortunately, the lunar calendar doesn't always work out as we would like. This is an important day to do some extra spiritual practice, to make offerings, to accumulate merit, to purify. So we wanted to do something. So our idea was from 8 to 9 a.m. Toronto time. Geshe is going to give the transmission of the sutra recollecting the three jewels. So this is one of the sutras recommended on important holy days by the late Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So he'll give a transmission of that, and then time depending, we might also recite it in English together. It's not a particularly long sutra. The next part of that is going to be an oral transmission of the Vajrasattva 100-syllable mantra, and just a really kind of short, condensed teaching on the meaning of the 100-syllable mantra. And then we'll make some prayers to dedicate the merit. So that is the plan for Chokor Duchen. So the next weekend, the following weekend, it's the August 1st weekend, which is a civic holiday in Canada. A lot of people tend to go away. So we will have that weekend off, but don't worry, we'll be continuing with more teachings right from the 2nd to the last weekend of August. For those of you following the Vajrayana teachings, just a reminder that we'll be opening those up so that you can watch the previous teachings for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. Dave and Manoshi, who are so kind to run that database, they will, you'll get a notification in our newsletter or something when those are open for people to follow. And then we start with Vajra Bhairav and completion stage of Vajrayogini sometime in September. Once those dates are finalized, we'll inform you. So thank you for bearing with the announcements. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, make yourselves comfortable. I'll invite Geshe down and we'll get started in 2 or 3 minutes. So welcome everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, Tashi Dele.
So Tashi Dele from Geshe. Great. We are good to go then.
Oh yeah, Tashi Dele to that Ganga Kiwo to Tayabo.
So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to everybody. Geshe hopes that you are all well and that everything is going well for everyone.
Oh, that Kiwo Yodo Mayo, say that so Shashalo, which is so Maris, so no Koropagento is that teacher the Ganzo Noga, say you that you are.
And so, of course, we understand that whether we're happy or not, right, it doesn't depend principally upon outer conditions. It depends more upon the inner conditions. And that is why we gather together on occasions like this one to get the instructions for training the mind.
Ganzo Legazo Teotere was Kiwoshiki Sergita, Kazeta Tapoe, Shuchertuya. So,
of course, practically what this means is what we are learning here, in fact, is to recognize the types of minds that lead to greater happiness and cultivate those minds. And similarly, recognize the minds that lead to greater suffering and diminish those minds as much as possible. And so one of the pieces of advice that the great Bodhisattva Geshe Sonam gives in relation to his text on the 37 practices is that if one looks externally towards the faults of others, there is no way to reduce or diminish those faults. So one should look towards reducing one's own faults. Chirulagi migi kyunden so zoya metsang jakatse mebasona mangro. So whatever sort of faults or enemies we defeat on the outside, they will only increase. So the secret is to look towards ourselves and diminish our own faults. So, if we look towards those external enemies and try to defeat those external enemies and situations, actually, usually what the effect of that is it won't decrease those external enemies. It will only increase those external enemies and problems. Ale, loso, ma. So it's actually not an external battle that we need to fight. It is an inner battle. We need to bring forth the forces of love and compassion and use those to defeat hostility and aversion. So the thing is, it's not that we are without enemies, but it's just that the external enemies are not the main enemies. It is the internal enemies. And if we are really seeking a stable, lasting happiness, it is the internal enemies that we need to pay attention to and defeat. And of course, these inner enemies, defeating them doesn't require spending a lot of money, having like elaborate weapons and so forth. Simply what we need to do is recognize the antidote to these inner enemies and cultivate those antidotes to diminish them. Apparently, my voice is too quiet today. Are you folks hearing me okay? Is that okay? I guess Geshe wants a little bit more oomph this morning. Humidity always makes me a little bit doozy. Okay.
다 그사라 다 니빠 첨보 요바데 다 시비토네 다 가제트도 뽑아 그거 아레스.
So, understanding this situation, then what we want to do is we want to bring forth a brave or a courageous attitude to make us powerful in this endeavor.
어다 던지지레인데 서래 마다 손지거리 타비거리 드니 생제 요도로 차대 요바도 가 강가 지바레 디와 와스.
And of course, fundamentally, the potentials are there because ourselves and indeed all sentient beings possess the potential for liberation, possess the Buddha nature or Tathagata Garpa.
어다 던지지레인데 사다 던지거리 자 첨보 되지 다 레레존에 마자 바다야 세바지 다 로로 소속을 내가 정말 첨보 체크요 아레스.
But we can't just be satisfied merely possessing that potential. What we need to do is activate that potential within our mind. So that is what we need to work towards.
다 손지게라자 첨보 땅이 먹을라 살아왔어. 다 나는 젤라 타비 로데지 타와 롤러로 시바지 사달레 깔아.
So one of the pieces of advice which Geshe has often shared is really relevant here, where the Buddha said, I can point to you the path to liberation, but it is you yourself who must cultivate, who must actualize it.
다 던지지레인데 다 대세야 대용 다 롤로 소소로 보ген 로야게 니바 차서 요 이전에 다 손지게 됐은 거 야마 맨 텐데 마야 스위든 깔로 노고 말아왔어.
So we can also understand actually from that piece of advice that within us, we have all the things necessary to be able to cultivate those instructions and achieve the realization, to be able to go to that destination, right? If that were not possible for us, the Buddha would not have given this advice.
다 릴라보도 야 말했더니 다 가제 터도 티소 고스 마체 바초 마자 바ችን 델바비 코로 땡데 진지부지 용거로 왔어.
And so, of course, it's not necessarily going to happen instantaneously, but if we continually train in hearing, contemplation, and meditation slowly, we will come to a result.
저 보게 다 땡도 첨부 다 땡보 치사 쪼데 고자야 되래. 다 대용 알랑 년도니 되고 다 가제 터도고 저들린다고 그거 알아왔어.
So the stabilizing practice, which really brings forth those realizations, is, of course, the practice of meditation. But we need the assisting conditions like water and fertilizer for a seed of hearing and contemplation. So all three are important.
다 제고돈 주고를 내가지 마시는 좋아하는 로지 매바테고 다 셀 토와 땡보지 그거 알아스.
And also we need to have kind of an understanding, a stable understanding within our mind that when we speak of meditation, if we don't do both the analytical and the placement aspects of meditation, we won't be able to make that progress.
간조 다 뭐요 알아왔어. 하이 데타세나 이네서는 고자야를 때는 레 돈비깔 고때 또다 자토 매이사 데타 디지와레.
Candice, drupta.
가서 간조 다시 들었어.
Ale, loso.
이네서는 고자야 주주제인디와 이사라왔어.
Yeah.
다 고또다 자토 매이사 덤보 알레 그자치 해서는 고자야다.
So for example, as a meditator, right, we understand that meditation on the generation stage of deity yoga, this is really just a meditation on bringing forth oneself as the deity in the mandala. But because we are not able to sort of do that easily in our mind, this is why we have a Ngawang, which is a method of accomplishment or a sadhana. It's because we're not able to do that straight away. So these are the preliminary remarks that Geshe wanted to make. So we're going to take a moment to place our body and our mind in a relaxed state. We need to have the mind peaceful so that the elements can fall into balance.
Gyatso tal hele yachimbo kyobai ane oda sabonda wa yabang muji oda se tnichiyo sombachi.
So we just imagine that the mind is like a vast ocean And when we stop the wind of distraction blowing, that ocean becomes vast, deep, but also calm.
Translator korota page ngo shiak chet sena mandu buchu julago ta no sel kar shawa yinayo sowa chimo meba ji titun tani de is.
And so as a preliminary to sort of be able to tap in to the fundamental nature of our mind, just see whatever is arising with a sense of awe and wonder, like a small child who walks in and looks at a beautifully ornate temple.
That's a zoa yinare, that's a nyamba yinare, karo shawa yinayo sel tan jawa chimbo mene. De role tani ta lele chini de yachi.
Whatever is arising within the mind, whether it appears to be good or whether it appears to be bad, just notice it with attention without grasping at it.
Chomebi tsowa no tu jendan ramada leba yinayo soso se te mo ta koromba kare shawa yina tel tani deba yina nya chuju no ji gyatso gola neba konyo meba gyatso la ota ten no ji rendu somatago. Yes.
So think whatever thoughts are arising in our mind, even if there's a lot of distraction in whatever the appearance they have, whether wholesome or unwholesome, just think they're like small minnows swimming beneath the surface of the water of our mind's ocean. They're swimming beneath the surface and we're noticing them, but they are not disturbing the water or making waves.
Se koroga ngo lumate yamba no ji ta lumate ga tola ta se lele shawa yo po cha sung sombo.
And by noticing and not grasping, think that we have tapped into our mind's natural, fundamental nature of equanimity, its neutral nature.
Tari se yo po te ta ge se yo shu yimbe ge se pusu tsuba ji ngo lo ya zhe ge yi somba ji
Jimbegisem chok.
yimbe nyo le ge se.
So then think that from this now calm fundamental basis of the mind, we are going to bring forth a wholesome mind of supreme generosity.
Senji ruzul kanya yung de ade zo nyeri chadung la teni rendu. Tani ji za ane ruje ruzu nyeri chadung to chayna jo maru sombe toni mi pa tembo.
So we think as we look towards all sentient beings, so many problems and sufferings of sentient beings arise due to them having attitudes of attachment and aversion. May they be separated from attachment and aversion, holding some close and others different and others distant. How wonderful that would be. May I help them to do this.
Nyeri chadung to ane chawa chechi nonto ta melo dung de toni ta mi pa tembo.
So first think, may they be separated from the attachment and aversion that holds some close and others different. May this be so. We make this as a prayer, as a wish path.
Melo zo mai ba ta til genja wo de ru so so lo yo de yi za sen ji yu zu ni ri cha do do cha wa da ge sha go so be to na la zo don de
I think merely the wish, merely the prayer is not enough. I also have some responsibility here. So think, may they be separated from the attachment and aversion that holds some close and others far away. I myself alone will help them to do this. So conjoin this equanimity with that pure superior intention.
Tendri soma nuji yungwa chi ta lama yu do su ji shon se sha yu zo la ta so wa zhe ji de da ga yu ta da yungwa chi xin ji la ta so.
In order for me to be able to actualize this for their benefit, I will make with a mind of faith and single-pointedness requests for the blessings of the Lamas, Yidams, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and wisdom protectors. Through bringing forth this mind and presenting equanimity, I've been able to engage in a supreme practice of generosity. Rejoice in this. So we'll begin with the recitation. Excuse me, that didn't go well. Tumba chom den de shin sheba joy chom ba yan da ba zo be song ge ba dan sha zu Sheba Jeden Gemba Gebuduwe Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Chonden de Dijin Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Songye Sheba Dan Shasu Demba Dewa Sheba Shiten Shemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lana Minamgi Temba Songye Chomden de Pejawa Shagya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyatso Jiho Tumba chomden de Dijin Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Songye Sheba Dan Shabsu Demba
Jiden Jamba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lada Minamgi Tumba Songe Chomdende Bejawa Shagya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyatso Ji Mandala offering. Begi Geshe Medo Zhang Zhira Lingshi Nidi Gyamba Di Sangye Shinda Mide Bowagi Jogu Nanda Jira Jeba Sho Idam Guru Ratna Mendala Kam Niryata Yami. Refuge and Bodhicitta. Chedon Zogi Chenam Lai Jongshu Bardu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benjir Sangye Jobar Sho Chedon Zogi Chenam Lai Jongshu Bardu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benjir Sangye Jobar Sho Chedon Zogi Chenam Lai Jongshu Bardu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benjir Sangye Jobar Sho.
Sorry, I think Geshe's asking, what are you doing? Now that I have this little mouse here, it's not nice to be able to switch the sound for musicians off without getting up. Okay. Courageous.
Oh yeah, ta tutani shawa ni stumi shawa tami shawa ta shato so de kachimole.
So of course we talk about the activities at the beginning and the end, and indeed all three types of activities at the beginning, middle, and end are important.
ta katsulaba no jire sha isi ta ne lo poge kalon onin jawa to ya te o ko pe karsekar. Te khoro ge chane o gewa to chimon royal ne se.
So, of course, when we, at the beginning of the session, visualize the objects of refuge and use that visualization as the anchor to develop our motivation, because of the power of the object or the basis, right? There can be a great accumulation of merit from that. So, regarding that principle, later, if there is time, Geshe will maybe Chikchena means maybe share a story regarding that. Another important principle, of course, is that so we have these objects of focus in our accumulation of merit, but also if it's not underpinned with a motivation not only for oneself, but for oneself and others, then there is a danger of those merits degenerating.
And
of course, we also know that one of the functions of making dedication prayers is to secure those merits so that they are protected from degeneration. So an interesting thing here is that when we talk about those degenerations of merits, which usually arises in relation to that mind of anger, it is in relation to the collection of merit. In fact, Chandrakirti in Entering the Middle Way, and Shantideva in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, they specify very clearly that it is the virtues connected with the collection of merit that degenerate due to anger. So what can we understand from that? That this principle of anger arising and degenerating virtues, this degenerates the virtues connected with the accumulation of merit, but it does not generate the virtues connected with the accumulation or the collection of wisdom. And then in those texts, sort of many amazing principles illustrated about why this is the case.
So at the
beginning, when we are developing the motivation at the beginning of the session, we want to bring forth a wholesome, virtuous mind in a very impactful and powerful way. That's really important. So, of course, in the beginning, we set a motivation as vast as possible, but in the actual session, the actual cultivation, right? Especially here, this is something that happens in steps, in increments.
So
And sort of following that progression is extremely important, because if we look at the Lam Rim, the stages of the path genre, we can see many of the holy beings who wrote those texts, they clearly state that if one does not have definite emergence, renunciation in place first, then we can't really talk about developing love and compassion in a meaningful way without that prior piece. Korwe mikto? Ale. Korwa dapo langsung kampa gimik.
Yeah, kumpa tempo.
Sorry. Korwa kosen. Mari nga korwa kosen. The stages. I'm really getting the sauce today. So the stages of the path are sort of arranged in this way, in that the prior stages of the path, common to beings of a lesser capacity and common to beings of a middling capacity, these are like the foundation stones that you need to lay before you can build your house. And on one level, actually, this makes perfect sense, because in sort of our experience of the world, we experience ourselves as being more prominent, more important, because if we can't see in our own experience how we, suffer due to the dissatisfactory nature of samsara, if we can't understand that, or if we can't bring forth a wish for ourselves to achieve the happiness, which is the bliss of liberation, then to wish that for others is going to be very difficult. So maybe a little bit too long of an introduction, but anyways, let us take a moment to now develop that motivation. So tapping into the fundamental nature of the mind, bring forth a stillness and a peace. The nature of the mind is something luminous, clear, and vast. Like a mirror, it can apprehend, it can reflect any object.
대츠마 소야가 쳇 윤중의 토라 다세 레레 자니 가서 뜻다야지.
In order to tap into that fundamental nature, we'll first settle the mind by directing our mindfulness, our awareness, to the rising and falling of the breath. Don't pay attention to any distracting thoughts. Simply be aware, breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out.
maybe so no to dash, trouble, Tamoko, Garsi, you say Zuma, Lele, Shawaya,
So through clearing away all of the unwholesome and distracting minds, at least on the coarser level, the mind has become even and still, peaceful.
Tani se rujige sawa yama nuji pa ngene gosheni ta pa be se te tani ja cher to ne ta pa ya pochi zo yi sombachi.
So tapping into the fundamental nature of the mind that is this aspect of pure luminosity, tapping into that power, we want to make the mind expansive and vast.
Ye so so nye ma yimba ma yuzu ro yuzu o das sonji ri tawiri sonji semberi chade yo somana.
So looking beyond ourself, looking beyond only those close to us, thinking all human beings, all animals, all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara. They possess the Buddha nature, the potential for enlightenment. They possess the potential for liberation.
Seche sindasi yina yo tungjizo sato, ngajashi sato, kontroshi sato ya tene me kanga jese tendila tene yina yo zaachi mo chunju yi sombachi.
There's not a single sentient being that I could point to who is a basis, who deserves the arising of my anger, of my pride, of my jealousy, of my aversion, because every single one of these sentient beings is close to me, is connected to me.
대도 dunga tata seya tatuge de nikato tatuge de chaso de ya ta ro soso ge di cheta ane ro soso ta sunji chato ba zo ge sombachi.
In order to benefit these beings who are close to me, to lead them away from suffering and to not just temporary but also ultimate happiness, for me to be able to actualize this, I must reach the state of complete Buddhahood. Bring forth bodhicitta. So we'll pause there.
오다 너 노진의 저거 도치 준비 요는 용도 수근도 와 손주지 세세한테 대 소왕이네 질래봐 얘는 뽑았대 그래 어다 니바대 그래 다 가디이나 고나윤지 밤에 가진 그래.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said many times that it is on the basis of bringing forth this bodhicitta that the mind becomes peaceful, that the mind becomes powerful. brave or courageous. Everything follows from that.
다 대지체 저 디렌도스 우주 강에 세야 되는 게요. 셰 토그레 셰가 셰기 세게 세대 바알레 네바처럼
And that really comes from the way of thinking, right? First, that sense of responsibility. I want to lead all beings away from suffering and towards happiness. Not only do I want to do that, but I definitely can do that. If I can do that, then I must do this. I must achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. This is an extremely powerful mind.
나저 드리소노 마토아죠 나치 인디치레가 니레가 마드스는 소소설 번에 강에 뭐 어서는 돈이 너도 뭐ቻ로.
Right. Otherwise, if we don't think like that, so people want me to adjust the sound again. Let me try that. Okay. Is that better? Otherwise, if we don't think like that, right, we remain centered on ourselves, thinking, this didn't go okay, that didn't go okay, I want this, and so forth, right? That's a very limited way of thinking.
Otherwise,
we remain obsessed with these small things about whether they're working in our favor or not, thinking, that didn't go okay, this didn't go okay, that isn't okay. That's not according to our liking. And we sabotage our entire life like that. Love, compassion, bodhicitta, they're exactly the opposite of that self-obsessed, dissatisfied mind. They're thinking, I am connected to others and I have a responsibility to others to reduce their suffering and to lead them to happiness. So, once sort of bodhicitta, we become sort of well trained in that. These dissatisfactions and things, they're still going to arise for us, right? But they're not going to be able to impact our mind in the way they once did. The other thing too that happens is that when we become well trained in bodhicitta, we'll become very adept at cultivating the practice of transforming those difficult situations, those dissatisfactions, into the path. So we want to be able to achieve Buddhahood, to lead all sentient beings to that state. This is the king-like bodhicitta. We achieve it first and lead them there. But in order to do this, we need to follow the stages of instruction. So to do that, we are going to turn to this text, which is the Lam Rim of the Sacred Words of Mañjuśrī by the great 5th Dalai Lama, and the omniscient one, the great 14th Dalai Lama, in this edition also gives many sort of glosses of the text, which Geshe is sharing as well. Oh, decent. So in terms of where we are on page 97 in the section wishing the teachings to remain for a long time, and we're in the part in bold. So in terms of what we have kind of cultivated in this section, learned in this section already, we talked about the 3 faults of the pot: upside down, leaky, and contaminated. We mentioned how training in hearing, contemplation, and meditation can resolve those. And then finally, we come to a discussion of the 6 discernments, which are necessary when listening to the Dharma teachings. So we are beginning right at the last sentence on 97. Regarding the holy Dharma to be heard, the gently protecting Lama and Dharma king, the great Tsongkhapa, says in his Songs of Experience, these stages of the path to enlightenment are the excellent transmissions from Nagarjuna and Asanga, crown ornaments of the wise ones of this world. Your banners of fame flutter resplendent among migrators. These transmissions are the king of powerful, precious oral instructions, fulfilling the wishes of living beings. They are an ocean of glorious and excellent explanations, a confluence of the rivers of 1,000 fine treatises. So
What?
treatises is texts.
어떤 데서 와 어다시 숨바 따르사 조된데지 돈비 뉴크 슈인 유류 좀보 동거 된전에 타타데 빌레제지 때침보 전주 로제 점바 너는 체와제도 체지 선지고니 체와도 봐봐 이 연비
So now a gloss from His Holiness the 14th. The stages on the path to enlightenment, the great treasure of excellent explanations which incorporate all important points of 1,000 fine treatises that extract the essence of the Bhagavan's teachings, are superior by way of the four greatnesses and three special attributes.
다 나로서도 된다 내세기 와래 전주 로제 점바 다 이님이 동다버데 쪼쪼데 손지 조된데 숨바라 와스 내서 간가 동보.
So the first thing that we want to discern from these instructions is that the stages of the path, the Lam Rim teachings, these are all traced to the original teachings of Lord Buddha. That's the first important thing to understand.
점바 니반다버데 쇼마도 요요니 같으니 보여 슈이 침보친 거죠.
The next thing that we want to understand is that in terms of the Lam Rim lineage, then also the Buddha's Maitreya and Mañjuśrī are extremely important for the vast and profound lineages.
다 디질 점바 서만다버데 다 쪼쪼 러데도 투메니 다 보게 야침보 다 때때 보게 되라면.
And the third sort of main beings that we think about in terms of the development of the stages of the path teachings are Nagarjuna and Asanga. They are also very important.
다 던지지 다 던지게 내서 여보대 하고서라 생체 용주가 다 시글로 주시네 시글로 셔바이나 강에 용주 세토야 시기 네데 레피테 강가도 토야.
Right. So these instructions of Dharma, of the stages of the path, are so profound that any sentient being who studies them and tries to put them into practice will be able to fulfill all of their wishes, will be able to accomplish all of their purposes.
다 던지지 생기도 와서 다 대응은 제와제도 체치 선지권에다네 다고 만다와지레스.
Yeah. And so as we go on in the text, you'll see that it's explained about what the four greatnesses and three special attributes of these teachings are, why they're important.
단내서 쪼쪼 전주 로지를 받으세요.
Right. Jangchu Lamgirim Barawa. Yeah, so you know, when we talk about these four greatnesses and these three special attributes, age.
pena loro chembo do loren jimbo te tanbo loro chembo nyole she matoki loren jimbo loren jimbo te nyole she matoki ta loren jomba shalu do ma nyuru to ne do de was of yares.
So all of the Lam Rim texts, you know, in a way they possess these special characteristics. You know, ideally the practitioner is going to study the Lam Rim Chamo, very important to read and study the great treatises, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. But for maybe beings who aren't able to do that just yet, you can read and study the Lam Rim Tingbo, the middling treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. But for beings who are capable not even of that, then we have the short Lam Rim texts, such as the Songs of Experience that was just quoted here. Yeah. So if even that, if even the Songs of Experience is too much, that's why we have the foundation of all qualities, the three principal aspects, and so forth.
샤고치기는 예대진만다고 배치도네 멜모치기야레스.
So in terms of the Yunten Jigurma, the foundation of all qualities, this text is particularly powerful in terms of glance meditations. Many holy beings did their glance meditation Lam Rim practice on the basis of that text.
어따로로 소소다서 그냥 가른 데와 체가 요더와 어따 윤윤유레게 돈에 로로 차소 세를 다 빠져야지 세를 이지면이냐 그거야레스.
So Geshe would really encourage all of you to choose whichever of those shorter texts that you like. For example, the foundation of all qualities, and try to go through this as often as you can so that you are consistently placing imprints for the complete path to enlightenment within your mind.
어따 뒷눈이 쪼 가르려도 뭐도 사소서 셀 따야라와스. 어따 이나이 강가를 샤고레제 어따 던지잖아. તને 오 빠져 보자기야레스.
So just to be clear, in the session, right, you're going to choose within those different points of the stages of the path what your focus is going to be. But by reciting all of the stages, even in the form of these condensed texts in every session, that glance meditation is going to put an imprint for the complete path within your mind stream. And that is something truly valuable.
다시 또 찌찌보더니 땜보서야 여보도 할래야래. 이나이 코알 땜보지 매아이자 강가를 빠져야지 마시나. 아니 요아도스라더니 오 여다 치모치 쓰기라레스.
So of course, not to diminish the importance of kind of picking one thing that you want to cultivate and sticking with that until you get some experience. The problem is we're impermanent. Life is short. We don't know how long we're going to be around. So we might be pushing one point, but never able to reach realization. But if we've done this glance meditation along with that, no matter what happens, we'll have the cause to meet the teachings of the complete path. That imprint is going to be in our mind stream. So this is really important.
어떤지바지 다 채와지더래. 땜바토진 가면도 두비 채와. 수라말레 동아도 차이 채와. 야이 공바 될라더니 비채와. 니시 첨보 용살레죠. 수에서 땜바토진 가면도 봐도 수라말레 동바총와도 야이고 동바 차와도. 야이 공바 될라니야 봐. 니시 첨비 용살레죠. 수
Jidang sumniga dro, so on,
아무래도 이마도 봤어.
right.
이 비채와 첨보 예수님바 따르르서.
So the stages of the path to enlightenment, the great treasure of excellent explanations, which incorporate all important points of 1,000 fine treatises, extract the essence of the Bhagavan teachings, are superior by way of the four greatnesses and three special attributes. So reading that again, therefore it is said, through them one realizes all the Buddha's teachings are non-contradictory. All teachings appear as personal instructions. One easily finds the intention of the conqueror, and one is protected from the abyss of terrible conduct.
다 로르텔로 로주야 고치네 다 그렇게 얘네 보게 중보서 로와이나 다 내지 시소나 땜바 요조는 가와메 받듯이 뭐시다 채와지 하래.
So if we approach the Lam Rim with an open mind and we consistently and honestly cultivate it, one of the benefits that we are going to come to is we'll be able to see how the entire vast corpus of the Buddha's teachings, they are without contradiction. That is one benefit.
어단이 받들 수라 말이 수라 다 티냐냐 니 되게 수다 로자가 수세하시라요.
Yeah.
어다지 하데 어단이 되게 다 된다 손지가 수 간디지 부에 통화이나요. 강가 맹화지 마도 파셔야지 좀 해봐 찾고 그래스.
Okay. And the next one, all teachings appear as personal instructions. This means the teachings of all holy beings, whether hearers, Shravakas, Bodhisattvas, or Buddhas, all of them are going to appear to us as personal instructions, as things we want to cultivate. So there's no danger of us setting aside or kind of ignoring an important instruction.
어다 벨라레 자갈라레 요다 모모슈인디 와스 제도 테메게세 아토뇨다 벨라 이나닌다 와도 응아도 다 던지게 노동아 어다 던지게 어다 뭐던바 요다 모모슈요레스.
And this is an extremely important point because the entire rich complete teachings, they started to degenerate in both India and in Tibet. And this is because people thought that the different vehicles were practiced in a vacuum. So for example, if you are practicing Tantra, you would neglect Sutra. And if you were practicing the Mahayana Paramitayana Sutra, you would neglect the Vinaya, the treatises on discipline. You know, this is something one should not do.
다 근데 저저 요다 지금 가서 이제 무슨 근데 와서 안에 리치 다 강가도 말어 왔어.
Yeah.
대화체 뭐 리치 그랬더니 테멜 통준다고 돼서서네 저로서 테멜이라고 도지서나 걸어서 딜레 저로서 손지기 수 돈에 말에 센지라요.
Right. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama has sort of joked that the karmic results of Mahayana practitioners denigrating the Shravakayana teachings as the Hinayana, saying that the Theravada is the small vehicle and looking down on them, that the karmic result of that was many in the Theravada tradition holding that the Mahayana is not the Buddha's word, that the Mahayana is not an authentic Buddhist teaching. So that's actually a karmic result of Mahayanas denigrating the Shravakayana.
다 단다이는 근데 가리라 때문에 다 가제 또 동보차 가제 또 다 강모차하고 찬사네.
And so if we look at the activities of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, we really see that one of the results of his dialogue with all of the Buddhist traditions is that we see, like, for example, between the Theravada, the Mahayana, and so forth, that there is a coming together, that a harmony that was not seen before.
조지 벨 페페가라요 산솔로 다 배가 로자와 깨로 최수지 고된데 시기 벤디와스 아니 코로니 군다 데데네 깨자시 베가라 다 페할 레벨 로자와도 개파치 모지 렌디와스 벨 초론자와 던디 개파 요는가 그야면디와스 조지도 뭐
Loso. So the story of Lord Atisha coming to Tibet, there's one part of this story where he encounters a very learned Tibetan translator. And they are sort of discussing, and he becomes very, very impressed with the Tibetan translator's knowledge. And he says to him, actually, if there's somebody like you who's already Tibetan and going to go back there, there's actually no need for me to go to Tibet at all.
So
let's also remember, right, that going from India to Tibet or whatever, there wasn't modern forms of transportation. So really making that journey was really taking one's life was putting one's life at risk. In fact, there were many who lost their lives traveling between India and Tibet to bring the teachings. So they went beyond the philosophical, and Atisha began to ask the Lotsawa, the translator, how he actually practiced. When he explained to Atisha the way in which he actually practiced, Atisha became very concerned and said, actually, I am needed in Tibet. It is necessary for me to go there. So what do we take away from this story, right? That this translator was a very learned scholar, but he didn't have the knowledge to be able to integrate that into a correct practice. And so all teachings appear as personal instructions. Also, reminds Geshe that in the days of Kyabje Bonka Dechen Ningpo, it is said that he would come across like a stray piece of paper with some scripture written on it. I guess this kind of happened when you were traveling around old Tibet, and he could look at what was written on that paper and he would say, this fits into this aspect of the path to enlightenment. There was nothing that he looked at and said, these words, these teachings are not needed. He had this holistic view, which knew exactly where each instruction had to be cultivated. It's actually, so Geshe is joking that he's rolling the mala, the rosary, carefully so that the clicking sound, it doesn't disturb Ngodrup. The part that he's not telling you is that that's actually my mala because his somehow fell behind his seat or something. But anyway. He said normally Geshe is a humble guy, so he carries a small little rosary of like I think 21 beads with him, but it fell behind somewhere, so I loaned him mine to use in the meantime. So he says mostly during our teaching sessions, Ngawang is the one who has to practice patience, but very occasionally, that's generous. Geshe has to practice patience too. One easily finds the intention of the conqueror. So here Geshe said this means that in terms of Shakyamuni Buddha, what his actual intended reason is for each of the teachings he gave, that with the Lam Rim, one is able to discern that without too much difficulty. Right. And one is protected from the abyss of terrible conduct. Nganso di akandes laugure sangye gi ka chik tongchung chia chupongile right sorry. So the abyss of terrible conduct, Geshe said that we can understand this in sort of like a broader way, that understanding the Lam Rim teachings helps us to avoid a lot of non-virtue, a lot of unwholesome conduct. But specifically here, this is often understood as understanding the Lam Rim teachings helps us to appreciate all of the Buddhist teachings, and in this way we are prevented from the very heavy negativity of abandoning the Dharma by dismissing certain teachings. So those are the four greatnesses. So now the gloss by His Holiness the 14th. This verse not only indicates the four greatnesses, but the attributes of, first, the subject matter being perfectly complete, second, being related to the methods for training the mind, and third, a profound import related to the Guru's personal instructions. Thus, the Songs of Experience states, if the great experts from India and Tibet, those fortunate ones, relied upon the supreme instructions of the stages of the path of the three beings, what intelligent person would not be captivated by these teachings? So here we covered these four greatnesses, and then we covered these, so here it's translated as three special attributes, but Geshe said three special attributes really means the three good qualities of these teachings. So subject matter being perfectly complete, this is the first of these special attributes. That means that everything that is needed is contained within those instructions. So, of course, we have other treatises, other texts, which are also important, but they're normally looking at one topic in a very vast way. Because the Lam Rim, the stages of the path, is a complete overview of the path to enlightenment, it is a special instruction that can help us to tame the mind. If we practice the Lam Rim, the mind will easily become tamed. So, also we mentioned these various lineage figures, for example, like Nagarjuna and Asanga. Why do we mention that? Because the Lam Rim contains the essential aspects of the instructions of these various great teachers within it. So these are the 4 greatnesses and the 3 qualities. Those are mentioned a lot when we speak about the Lam Rim. And then the verse from the Songs of Experience says, whoever listens to the Lam Rim teachings with an open mind, there is nobody who would not be pleased by hearing it. So all important points of the path were on page 99, traversed by all Sugatas and the 84,000 heaps of Dharma, excellently expounded by the son of Suddhodana, the Buddha, the incomparable guide, were first taught by the teacher, and then the 2 charioteers independently commented on the intention of those teachings, which were in turn brought to definitive conclusion by the Panditas, those foremost scholars of India. Through excellent analysis and explanation, the Mahasiddhas put these into practice and gave rise to realizations, and thus the teachings became bases of conviction. All of these teachings that were unerringly transmitted from one to the other were condensed by the glorious Atisha Dipamkara, the sole deity, into the practice of the instructions of the stages of the path of the 3 persons, the lamp for the path, and so forth, which were propagated widely. So this is the history of, helping us to understand that the key figures and the instructions in the Lam Rim lineage, like from Asanga and Nagarjuna, right, that the richness of the tradition does not stop there. Because when we mention the Panditas, these are the scholars of those great monasteries of India who took the writings, the teachings of Asanga and Nagarjuna as personal practice. They used analytical and placement meditation to develop realizations based upon those instructions. And then they became Mahasiddhas. They became beings whose faith in the teachings was based on the conviction that comes from personal experience. So this follows the Buddha's instruction, which says, do not accept the teachings merely out of respect for me. So that means that we're not passive about it, saying, Nagarjuna and Asanga said this and they're holy, therefore it's true. No, we contemplate and use our own wisdom to develop an understanding of the teachings, and we decide according to that experience what is accepted and cultivated. And in this way, realization is developed.
다 르르 이나 데려 와서 어떤 네 유대 중대래 네 유대 니대래 아마 봤다나
Yeah.
오늘 뭐 봐봐 도면 세 준비 중에 다내 조대래 중대래 내도 조대래 봐요 또또 셰사레스
In fact, they want to challenge us and they want to think for ourselves. We can see this very clearly when, for example, Nagarjuna, he poses some sutras as provisional and some sutras as definitive based upon a Madhyamika, a middle way view. Asanga, on the other hand, Semsamparwa, he held the Chittamantran mind-only view. So he designated different sutras as provisional, some of the ones that Nagarjuna had said were definitive, and vice versa, right? So they gave different teachings like that. So when we speak of the trailblazers or the charioteers, the two charioteers, right? Nagarjuna was the opener of the chariot way, the opener of the chariot path, mainly for the Madhyamika or the middle way teachings. An interesting caveat here. Asanga, he was the trailblazer, the charioteer, who opened the road, the chariot way of the Chittamantran teachings, of the mind-only teachings. Yet, it is said, he was not actually a Chittamantran himself. Yeah, so we would say that generally it's understood he actually held the Madhyamika view. But a lot of the writings that he composed were from the Chittamantran, the mind-only tradition, so that would not degenerate. So in particular, and I'm sorry, I don't know the name in the Sanskrit, but Geshe is mentioning a very important commentary by Asanga on the Ju Lama, on the Uttara Tantra Shastra or Sublime Continuum. Right. So just to know here, right, we only, in this context, we only have two figures that are designated as charioteers or trailblazers, and that is Nagarjuna and Asanga. Right, so there's many scholars, many panditas, but here we only speak of two charioteers. Okay. So those that followed this system, the holders of the undegenerated conduct of scholasticism, ethics, and goodness, renowned as the Jo Kadampas, pervaded this snowy land like the sky covers the earth. Yes, so Disha, So this tradition of Tibetan lamas, they were ones who took the instruction of Lamp of the Path by Lord Atisha as their sort of main practice, and then they spread out all throughout Tibet, propagating this tradition. Yeah. Jakar Dromi Tubne, Jangchagi Lam Rim, Tangna Pusong. Tsuryong Tugime
어,
Dukda.
대 군바티에서 노로
Right. So as you know, this instruction on the lamp of the path to enlightenment, the story behind this was that actually there was a certain point where Atisha was supposed to return to his monastery in India. But Geshe wasn't sure what exactly the obstacle was. He wasn't sure if it was like an avalanche from the snow mountains, but it was some kind of significant obstacle. It was very difficult for him to get out. So what he did was he offered this teaching of the lamp of the path to enlightenment to be eventually, I guess, couriered to his monastery as kind of like an apology and also requesting for forgiveness at not being able to return.
다 손주 로르텔 간단히 나렌다 케파르지기 따그 케파강 할레스와레스.
Yeah. So when the scholars of Atisha's main monastery of Nalanda read this text, Lamp of the Path, they were all like completely amazed.
다 조지 자가 가세 주바이나 인들이 주타치 뭐지 릴라고치 소르치 말레스.
And they thought actually, maybe if Atisha had just remained in India, if he hadn't gone to Tibet, he wouldn't have had the conditions to be able to compose a text as pithy and profound as
다
this.
된다 첨보지는데 다 별 가세 주나 주나 어쨌든.
Yeah. And so, because they sort of liked the text, I guess they accepted his excuses, apologies, and he was able to remain in Tibet.
다 대화된 로토나 같은 데서와.
Mm-hmm.
야, 저 라용 디저가요 가위 마도 바도 로바도 베 점에 바바 노라 노 세베레데 시다 쳔보 이빠따라 요요 메이 리소이
Lama Tsongkhapa.
요요 메이 세베 가게 치치자보 tsongkhapa 집에 전주 러저럼바 치주도 좌비 녜메 레바시베 떼지 쳔보 너도니 대화 고고고 류도 제 땜바 쇼레 쪼라 셴네 니체이 로도라 주바 마임바 시안에 시니에 땜비 땜바 토지 저지 런지 체시바 나이 라마 시비 대도 텀비 고모다 체케 샤바도 로데 짜와시비 로르지 주테노 소지제 땜빙과도 타다 시버슨저 런저 럼바 디니 땜비스 땜바 통지 가메도 뚜비 타스 데바이
Yeah, that's right. So then, those that right, sorry. So, therefore, for the sake of once again eliminating the stains of misconceptions and a lack of realizations due to this degenerate age, Manju Gosha, the Dharma king Tsongkhapa, akin to a great charioteer and wise in the dance of human existence, composed the renowned extensive and abridged treatises on the stages of the path. These unprecedented, excellently expounded great treatises do not engage in limited objects to be adopted and discarded on account of being biased toward particular higher and lower vehicle teachings of scripture and realization.
다 조지 저주 로데 코타 쳔보도 다 드리기 피다보지레 되는 이나이 텔라테네 강가하고도 말아와스 유유이사 텔라테네 다 도파도 다 드린다만다 뭐 용거야.
So here we have to clarify that, Lord Atisha's text, A Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, was surely profound, but it was also very short and condensed. And so in a short text, there's not any way to kind of include every single point that needs to be included for it to be comprehensive.
다테 그게 다 로도 강가 파세하게 제들 라마 정가베 다 로르 친주르 제드는 거 다 저거 주바치 이사레스.
And sorry, because it's not comprehensive, various doubts and so forth could arise. So in order to make the teachings more comprehensive and dispel these doubts, the great Lama Tsongkhapa composed the Lam Rim, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment.
나는 솔직히 때마 간디지나 저지 로드 체시바세한테 대세기 아레스 빼는데 저진다고 지나 내 저지를 와 저지죠.
지지세나?
눈에 당길래서 지지.
지지하고 말씀. 지지자셔.
저지스리 저지.
룹지. Okay.
보소아 저지 로드 체시바.
Yes, yeah.
지지도와.
Yeah.
빼는데 저지 로드 체시바스인데 저지대.
Yeah.
쇼 가와네 쇼 진이 가와네 태소나 이제들래 거로 완전도 어땠어요 그래서.
So here Geshe is I don't see it here in the translation, but anyways, I'll just tell you what Geshe said. So Geshe said that the stages of the path are like a four-cornered cloth. That means that when one part of it is practiced, it reinforces the others. Just as if you have a bunch of stuff in the middle of the cloth, whether you pull on the corner to the north or on the corner to the south, you'll be able to move all the cloth together.
So it
relates all of the various practices together and allows them to be practiced together, no matter what the point of particular emphasis is.
So it
shows us, right, when we're cultivating the great scope, that this also requires the underpinning principles of the small scope, and that when we practice the great scope in a comprehensive way, it also allows us to move the small scope practices forward as well.
고자 때라 내별 롱지 제시 마도 디 예라 페데드 머니피카 데 수제라 수비 링아가 레던 버테노 노이까 예네 메바 마제 디 쇼서 론롬 머니아바 까반제지.
So sorry, so drum tumpa gitsikti lomason. Oh, right. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yes. So the reason that I didn't see it in the text is because I didn't turn to the next page. So that point is at the very top of page 100. My apologies. The one who knows how to practice the teachings as a four-sided path. So like that's the cloth with the four sides is my guru. So continuing. The aforementioned treatises on the stages of the path take lamp for the path as their foundation, bring together all the essential points of the Buddha's teachings into the stages of the path of the three beings. Therefore, they are methods by which one can realize all teachings as non-contradictory. Furthermore, from among individual dispositions and inclinations of trainees, the Buddhas taught to those of lesser aptitude or beginners that even slightly engaging in killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lies, divisive speech, harsh speech, gossip, and so forth is by nature harmful and lacks any benefit for others. The Buddha never permitted those 7 acts of body and speech, killing, and so forth in a context where it brought no benefit to others, and he prohibited turning the mind towards those. However, once the discernment of a person has considerably increased and one has an altruistic special intention that is stable and vast, then in extraordinary circumstances of time and place wherein there is an exceptional great purpose to benefit others, performing those 7 acts of body and speech, so those non-virtues, was permitted. So we want to be really clear that as a beginner, when we speak about the 10 non-virtues, the unmistaken way for a beginner to practice is to abandon all 10 as much as possible. No exception there. Right. So once bodhicitta is brought forth and one begins to cultivate as a bodhisattva, then there are going to be certain exceptions where engaging in conduct that seems to be connected to the 10 non-virtues is permitted, right? But that's after one is a bodhisattva. Right. And of course, how one kind of quickly one comes to that, this depends upon one's own affinity and capacity, right? How powerful the disciple is. Yep. For those beings who are unable to meditate on mind generation, which engenders positive mindsets for the sake of all sentient beings. Konso semke kemi tugenden sorwa. Right. Di labs wanwa. Nanso kawaya nga pek gotumso. Konso chuden so che chogires ine netso mixen nanglola koronso yempengi chedu so chogires.
Chui dise mobodo anwa. Lo jachi mo chabikala.
Dilo sarwa. Yeah, dene dijela, dene
Deja se achi tongso.
Deja, yeah.
Deja konta reshi senche tongche jetela lo zombo sheji seshe go mato ba. Runi sipa kowa le choi taba de gipi taba tenyi jalo de shenda kachi tande jalo de she gipa nenji suila.
For those beings who are unable to meditate on mind generation, which engenders positive mindsets for the sake of all sentient beings, it was emphatically stated that since one must achieve freedom from cyclic existence, the mind seeking liberation is extremely important, and therefore one must generate the mind wishing for liberation.
어떤데 가체슈치 다 이사래 시우 첨벌은 로와라 인지 민저 소소가 보게 타와 되냐걸로 템보지 말래나 코알라 닌지 템보 요토요 말레스.
So Geshe thinks that this actually might be the most important point that we've come across so far. And the point is that if one is not able to, with a small, like with the intention of oneself, strive towards liberation and really wish to achieve liberation for oneself, there is going to be no way that one can work towards the liberation of others. So this conviction and wish for liberation for oneself definitely needs to be in place as a preliminary.
다 칸이셔야 돼 가지고 리라본도 텐데 리라고 말아와서 간주 단다 이나이다 거의 샤와 토자 조조스는 세게 디프게라
Yeah.
세게 디디들 거의 샤와 샤와 벌써 소바대야 지 간주 토자스 되기가
Toja Susana?
토자
Right. And it's easy to say that we've brought forth an attitude that definitely wants liberation. But if you look at your life honestly, how much of your energy is put into achieving advantages, into securing and winning things that are samsaric, into trying to achieve the happinesses of samsara.
베드 니가 먹이야도 말했더니 이나요 다 가디 이나 토자 때 뭐라고 주대와 이나 다 디가 인줄로 보여고 빠지신다.
So not to say that we don't need to kind of have a basis for supporting ourselves and secure way to have these temporary happinesses. But if we see striving towards those things as our main focus, our main object of attainment, this is going to be a huge obstacle to developing renunciation, definite emergence, to developing this mind that strives to be free. So seeing all samsaric activities and happinesses as having no essence, as being temporary, this is not such an easy mind to bring forth. So this mind of definite emergence or renunciation, now you see why Ngawang harps on and on about definite emergence. It is defined as a mind that definitely strives towards liberation. So that mind that definitely strives towards liberation is this conviction that liberation is something I really need. Right. So, we speak about a definite emergence, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. There are, sort of like concise and easier teachings, like the 3 principal aspects on the path that are given. But what one really needs to bring forth is a definitely emergent way of thinking. It is like a way of thinking or a thought, and that is not necessarily easy to bring forth. So we can have that thought of definite emergence, and that we could express just in a very easy way. It's a conviction that the bliss of liberation is something that I absolutely need to achieve. So Geshe said that actually this is a nice place to end it on this important point. So we are going to pick up at the top of page 100.
대제 되어 개정 문제
And when I said, no, don't need to get it.
No, just-
So we'll leave it there. And Geshe said also, we didn't get to Gampopa this time, but he does plan to pick up Gampopa again as well. And the reason for going through the Gampopa, you know, they are pith instructions, very kind of short lines of instruction. And this also places really valuable imprints within the mind. So then in this way, we have covered a few pages of the text, at least briefly. Please, if you are trying to have some stability in your learning, remember the 4 greatnesses and the 3 special attributes, or the 3 qualities. That's kind of like your homework. So there's a lot of conversation in the text, and it's all important. But if we talk about like the pith essence, it's those 3 and those 4. And we can also see from the instructions that we went over today how cultivating these teachings and instructions, it is a valuable protection, especially from the danger of the karma of abandoning the Dharma. We'll be protected from that. So thank you very much. Geshe would like to leave it here. So with a mind lifted up in joy, let us dedicate the merits. Changju semju rinpoche maje banam jeju richi jewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu bewa risho tongni tawa rinpoche maje banam jeju richi jewa nyamba meba yang Gone gondu bewa sho jambe bao jita kempa tong kundu zambo deyan dejin de da kungi jesu da lo chir gewa de da tangche rabdu ngo dusun shebe gyawa tangche ge ngowa gangla chodu nga ba de dagi gewe tsawa tikun kyang zambo jeji rabdu ngowa ge gangji rawe kowe jinkam de pendan dewa malu jongwe ne Shenre ziwon tenzin gyatso yi shabe site bado tenkyo. Think in this way, through my efforts here, I have been able to purify obscurations and accumulate great merits. Through this practice, then, just as I wish, may it become the cause for me to be able to perfect all attainments. So through these powerful virtues that we have accumulated, may all beings who possess evil minds, who possess dishonest minds, who possess minds that wish to harm and compel others, may those minds of evil thoughts be completely cleared away. May they give rise to wholesome thoughts of kindness. And in this way, may the sun of happiness shine without discrimination on all sentient beings. So we'll pause there. So yeah, you're very so of course I always say if you need to get on with your day, please feel free. But also if you'd like to hang out for questions, please stick around. And if anyone has a question, don't be shy.
다단다도 캐르게 체다지 당기 또 머리게 주시래 내가 길래마서
No
Geshe
questions
was
on
saying
social
that
media.
Oh, Geshe, sorry, just before Geshe
Yeah.
was saying that my voice was really quiet at the beginning, but well, when he mentioned it, Dave didn't think so. So I stayed quiet until the end, and now he thinks I'm loud again. I mean, I didn't even notice, but yeah, have to respect that. Geshe likes a bit of oomph, a little bit of pep in the step. So I'll try to bring that forward. Sorry, Dave, go ahead. Was there a question?
Oh, just saying, at the moment, there are no questions on social media yet. But I had a question that came to mind.
For sure.
The text mentions, after the two great charioteers, it mentions 4 panditas. And I
Does
wondered,
it say 4 panditas?
yeah, I think so. And I wondered who those were.
Let me just check. Konso Shinta Suje ni matok mendua rua. No,
No?
sorry, Dave, it doesn't mention 4. No, I'm looking at, so it's on, if you have the book with you, it's on page 99 in the first part of the second paragraph. So the line reads, then the 2 charioteers independently commented on the intention of those teachings, which were in turn brought to definitive conclusion by the panditas. So it doesn't mention a number of panditas, at least not in what I'm seeing.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
또 뺀르치디 요하라와
Chudun.
예투 추니사 ngama 이렇게라시 뭐 이나 야 저토지 첨부 될 때에서 저거 됐어.
Gentru dene chokni dene jaurum buche chudun lamna. So, but anyways, you got an answer anyway, Dave. So
yeah.
Geshe would say that normally we speak of the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes, but actually His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has said that is too limited, and we should think of the 17 great panditas of the Nalanda tradition, and he's actually composed a text of supplication to them. So you can find yeah, so His Holiness wasn't satisfied with the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes, because he thought, you know, there's still quite a few of the great pandits who were very kind that you left out. So he proposes praising all of these, the principal 17 Pandita scholars of the tradition. So, you know, if you're wondering, so for example, who the 2 supremes are, they are the 2 supreme ones in conduct who composed Vinaya texts. So they are known as Gunaprabha and Shakyapprabha. Yunten o dang Shakya. Yeah. I'm glad those 2 years of trying to look at Vinaya paid off. I was able to remember the names. That's something. So Geshe said maybe folks are feeling a little quiet today, so he's okay to close with a story if people would prefer that, if there's no questions. Are people cool with that?
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, we'll read the question first then.
Would you like me to read it since I submitted it?
Yes,
This is
please.
Nancy.
Please do.
Yes, please.
Go for it.
All right. I entered late, so this may have no reference to today's teaching. So if that's the case, you can say, hold off. But I read, is that all right?
Yes, no, it's, I just wanted to say, like, there's, I mean, you know, barring decency, but luckily we always have decent people. There's not really any question that's forbidden in class, so please don't worry about that.
All right. So there's a book about a tertone that was written by an English journalist, I suppose, and there's a phrase in the book is entitled A Step Away from Paradise, and there's a phrase in the book about the tertone's earlier life and other tertones, that information was placed for them and, you know, for use at the appropriate time in the future is consistent with tertones. But the phrase that I'm asking about is a part of the mind that is unchanging. I don't recognize that from other Tibetan Dharma teachings or discussions about Sem. And so I wondered about that phrase. What part of the mind is considered unchanging? And this may be a stretch, but I've always also struggled with Tathagata Garbha. I don't know if that's Tathagata Garbha, but that's my question. Is there a phrase that means in English the part of the mind that is unchanging?
You have no idea the can of worms that you just opened. No, I'm kidding. This is actually a really interesting and good discussion.
I'm
And
delighted.
there's been
I'm
hundreds of
delighted.
pages written on this. So I think Geshe will have he'll have an interesting answer for you, but I don't think it's something we're going to cover just in a Q&A. We probably need to do a course on the Tathagata Garbha. But anyways, let me ask and I'll get you Geshe's thoughts on it. Dene ko dinsang deb chik logi yores. Deb dinso tertun ningma tertun ki kolare duas roa. Dene konso kandes lagure menga ke chempo konso like begi yore roa. Ane dene tutsu mindu dene beagi denso konso kandes la ratu gire dua. Di chikche yene tso chik dedi nanglola semgi chashe chik mi gyorwa re dua. Dene sem nanglola sungshe jenda donang tena sem nangla mi gyorwa chikyang yoma res roa sem chatsangwa ke chikmagi rangjin re dua kadi ne gyorwa drogi re dua stene sem mi gyorwa gi chashes labna kotes gotumson sem nangla mi gyorwa kawayeres di sangye gi rik dejin chepe rik tapo chikres mi gyorwa sem nangla mi gyorwa zuguzusa kawayeres.
매미 다 먼저 와서 건조한로 좀 매비게 잘 오이지 말았어. 좋아? 아니 먼저 왔던 조한로 좀 매봐도 요 말아왔어. 무다비로 이자.
Yeah. So Geshe's first comment is that he thinks unchanging is maybe pointing at something, but he doesn't think that they mean unchanging in an absolute sense and that it never changes, because you're absolutely right that when we speak of the mind, it's a continuum, right? And it is something that is, is changing in a state of flux. It doesn't remain solid.
다 이나요 다 리라오셔요. 빼나 다 빼때서 야가서 남데 때사보소나. 빼나 간좀 못다 반다고 소나 또 많이라고 소나 또 많이 지라 차소나. 세메 또 차소나.
Yeah.
다 때까지 이나고 요 매봐. 돈이 되그래 마도.
Right.
돈이 마도 베세 건조한로요 말했어.
So, but maybe, and Geshe said he's guessing here, maybe it's speaking about things that are cultivated within the mind. So it is said that we have this mind, it is impermanent in the state of flux. But when one meditates upon emptiness and comes to a pramana, to a valid cognition of that emptiness, that valid cognition, that pramana remains within the mind without degenerating. This could be an aspect that is unchanging, he thinks.
다 드리지는 저함에 봐서 드리고요 아래. 다요. 예.
Yeah.
술로 춘거 술로 존지 삼바 술로 리니즈데.
Yeah.
술로 리니즈데 존지 sen 저함에 봐. 고 손지 삼도 그래.
The other thing, when the bodhisattva is going from the small path of accumulation and reaches the middling path of accumulation, at that point, the bodhicitta becomes incontrovertible. In other words, it does not degenerate. The bodhicitta is going to remain as a solid realization. So this could also be an example of not the mind being unchanging, but a mind being unchanging, maybe. Geshe said, though, the caveat here is that it doesn't change in the matter of it doesn't degenerate, but definitely from the middling path of accumulation onwards, there's a positive increase in bodhicitta, right? So it's flourishing and changing in that way. Yeah.
me yimade.
Me and Pade.
Nga tada marwas.
Yes, yeah.
They konjawa lela wonroya was.
But you know, when we think about like aspects of the mind that change very easily, right? If we talk about the I and my mind, right now we're in this form and we're thinking like I'm a human being. That could change very quickly, and that aspect of the mind changes very quickly in future incarnations, right? If we're born in another form.
Ta ngaroso se de se mayimba chinja wonroya teni yo amare.
But mind, we could also say, is unchanging, and something that is mind or something that is consciousness cannot become non-mind, cannot become non-consciousness. So that may be another way of understanding this phrase. Also something that is the I, something that is the self, it's not going to become not self. I'm not saying non, I'm saying not. It's not going to become not self or not I. So that could be another example of something that's unchanging. So Geshe said this would be his guess at ways that we could understand unchanging. So even things that have aspects of change, aspects of impermanence, in certain ways they can be said to be unchanging, and those are the examples that Geshe gave. We also talk about the bliss of liberation being unchanging happiness, or unchanging peace. That's another place where we see this word. In Tibetan is Migyurwa, unchanging.
Right. Okay, Migyurwa, right.
Anyways, I think this is a much vaster discussion, but hopefully you got some answers to your question.
Well, going back to the three vessels, I hope I am not full of holes. I'm certainly not turned upside down. And yeah, I hope to retain. One of my professors, his whole life work was on Tsongkhapa, and I would ask him always, I said, what is it? And he would say, well, it's the Tsongkhapa.
Yeah. Turing lotra kepa chit di condensed lagret dejin chepe rik di kares tene ko dejin chepe rik res mato laya shada mantua rwa tene ko di anyaria tauchi chagi res rwa. Yes, so Geshe, he understands that, but he would say he would posit an easy answer to what is the Tathagata Garbha, and his easy answer to that would be it's the aspect of our mind that allows us to reach Buddhahood, that allows us to reach enlightenment. That is the Tathagata Garbha. And the nature of the bodhisattva or the bodhisattva potential, it is that part of our mind which can realize bodhicitta, which has that potential. Right. So Rik, so I should I know that the questioner, the person who asked the question, you may know a little bit of Tibetan, but maybe not everybody else here does. So I ask Geshe if I could share this as a qualifying. So Rik, the Tibetan word rik, this means lineage. So when we say the Tathagata Garbha, in Tibetan is Dejin Chepe Rik, which means the Tathagata lineage. So Geshe said lineage is something that is understood as you possess, that you are born with. Just as in old India, if you were born into a Kshatriya family, you became a Kshatriya. If you were born as a Brahmin, you were born as a Brahmin, and so forth. The other thing too, that if we want to unpack Tathagata Garbha a little bit, is we can think of it in terms of actually two lineages, the naturally abiding lineage and the developmental lineage. Yeah. Rangje Nejiksen Asemgi Tompani Diro. So if we say the naturally abiding lineage, right, this is the emptiness of the mind, its empty aspect, and the emptiness of the self. We can also consider that part of it. The developmental lineage are the minds that we develop that are based on potentials within us: love, compassion, patience, and so forth.
through the
Oh, yeah, that's all.
paramitas in many ways. Yeah, and practice.
Yeah.
One quick thing, and I know other people are making comments. Since this phrase was used in this book about the tertone, are tertones considered bodhisattvas in some way, that when they are ripened, as you said, the Tathagata Garbha is that part of the mind that allows us to reach Buddhahood, and then there are when something that abides, when bodhicitta moves from the small to the middle path. Would that have been in reference, perhaps, would the tertone have been a developing, you know, or am I mixing? I'm mixing.
I don't
two
I think
things.
it's like a different thing. Like
Okay.
let me ask Geshe, but I'll ask Geshe what he
Yeah, I
thinks.
don't want to glum things together that don't belong
Because I
together.
think the tertons, they had previous connections as disciples of Padmasambhava, right? That's why they're able to discover things. Terton seria di konso jangsho gi sempares, konso jangsho gi sempa tsoklam chungu le jingjogi res dela chene terton res, ngala pa ingachena konso kewa ngoma di lopen rumboche gi dulja dabochi res dela tene terton chagire dewas.
Yeah, that's it. We can just
Right. So Geshe said he's not sure. A terton means somebody who reveals something.
Right.
So they possess
Treasure.
some sort of realization which can locate and reveal those things, but he's not sure what that realization would be. He doesn't know.
I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I think I see Nadia. If you want to go ahead.
Please.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Yes, lovely. Thank you for your teaching, Skanda. Just a quick question, if you would be able to elaborate on the Drum Tunpa's quote on page 100, just on the top.
Yeah.
The one who knows how to practice the teachings as a four-sided path is my guru. So what does four-sided path mean in this aspect?
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Nadia. Yep, okay. Then nganso di drum tumpagi shewa di nganso di drupshi roa netso ji yopagi lam di. Netso ji yopagi lam kandesh chikres. Drupshi dapo gi lam di karires. Netso ji den so yena?
Maybe that's just say that kite image is kamaris.
Yeah.
Temeg nyole teche tapena shivu chunga to shivu to teni nyole yaro was.
Right.
Teche genjo chonje semi nyole chi so gre kanga tel tu roto ba so shisuna.
Right. Di
Ochi tegre.
So
Jodunga teta ruma restenda.
yeah, so Geshe would say that he wouldn't think that four-sided is to be understood as an actual number, like there is a path that contains four things that you're supposed to do. He thinks that the four-sided cloth is an analogy, which is that analogy of when in the context of the Lam Rim, we are practicing, for example, the great scope. The middle scope is included as something that is buttressing or bolstering that. So it's like pulling on that side of the cloth, but the whole cloth and the things on top of it move together because each of those four sides is connected to the other. So he thinks rather than like a number four, it's just that four is to bring forth this image of a four-sided thing. So when you pull on one corner, the whole thing moves. Yeah. So he doesn't think that there's like would be four like particular points that would be understood here. So the Lam Rim practitioner, ideally what they're doing is if they're practicing something, for example, let's say avoiding the 10 non-virtues, right? That this is combined with some of the wisdom from the great scope, right? That it is combined with an intention of renunciation, right? So all of the things are reinforcing each other and moving together. So the four sides are moving together, but this also has the implication that they are not disconnected. No aspects of this graduated path or practice in isolation, right? They're not disconnected. So Geshe said that like the analogy, the four-sided cloth works nicely because of how you move it, but it could be 5 or 6 or 21. It could be lots of sides to this cloth. Yeah. But it's this idea of a holistic, connected practice that things come together.
This way.
Okay, I think we got Nadia's question. Thanks so much, Nadia. And Dave, is there anyone else?
One moment. No. Oh, so wait, I just came across one here. Yes. What are the causes for Buddhahood liberation in one life?
So Sangye mitse chik nanglola drubyala gyukaredes. Yeah, mitse chik nangla drubya gyukaredes.
Dan Gochibo in the Teyomares. Otanga in the Tateyares.
And the gyukaredes.
Jukares erital Luchamo, Sertramonita. So like a chat,
So firstly, in one lifetime to reach Buddhahood, to go from being an ordinary being to a Buddha in one lifetime is not possible through sutra alone. One must also practice Tantra. And the cause of that is really being able to tap into the extremely subtle wind and mind and use that to apply the practice. So if one, through the methods of Tantra, is able to tap into and harness the power of the extremely subtle wind and mind and bring forth the attainment of this wind body, which is known as the illusory body, after that illusory body has been achieved, enlightenment is said to be guaranteed in that very life. Right. And so it doesn't matter which of the illusory bodies it is, right? There's different types, like the pure and impure illusory body. Once the illusory body is brought forth, then enlightenment guaranteed within that lifetime. So when we say impure illusory body, that's the illusory body has been achieved, but the afflictions have not been completely obliterated or purified. When one has achieved the illusory body and also completely purified the afflictions, this is known as the pure illusory body. And so the interesting thing is, for the yogi or yogini who has achieved the illusory body, they actually don't need their normal corporeal form, like their flesh and bones body anymore, but they sometimes maintain that body in order to be able to interact with disciples more naturally. But in many ways, they're beyond that body. So the illusory body is a body which is in the essence of subtle wind. And from that kind of perspective, it shares some common characteristics with the Bardoa, the Bardo being's body. Not the same, but sharing some characteristics. So it's not possible in one lifetime through sutra alone to achieve that complete Buddhahood, go from an ordinary being to Buddhahood, because in sutra, the instructions for being able to utilize and harness the extremely subtle wind and mind are not given. So of course, sutra essential and very helpful and very important, but it's working on sort of a more manifest or coarser level. It's not able to tap into the extremely subtle wind and mind. Yeah. So right now, for most of us, it's like our extremely subtle wind and mind, they're like present, buried deep within us, but they're in a dormant state. It's like they're sleeping, that we're not able to tap in or to use them. Right. So there's a debate point, Geshe said, and this is one for you to think about. As you know, sometimes Geshe doesn't like to give you the answers. So is the extremely subtle mind an example of a mind or consciousness without an object? Is it an example of a mind or consciousness without an object? So when we talk about the extremely subtle mind, for most of us, it's abiding in the indestructible drop at the heart, which is composed of the white constituents of our father and the red constituents of our mother. So this extremely this indestructible drop of the red and white substances is very important, because as we go through the death process, these loosen, this allows actually the consciousness to leave the physical body. And this is what makes kind of the journey from one lifetime to another possible. So Geshe thinks that it's okay to end here. But I would say, if you want more, don't forget that tomorrow at 8 a.m. we have this special... So he is going to tell the story. He is going to tell the story. Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah.
So Geshe said, we're ending with the story. So no more questions allowed after the story. He's teasing you, I think. I think.
So
this is a story about the advice not to denigrate or look down upon others. Yep. So it's a story about how those of us who are human beings in the desire realm, we have sort of a tendency to be pretty proud, to think like pretty full of ourselves, and maybe we look down on other types of beings and others. But those beings in the form and formless realms, when they look at us in the desire realm and the type of body we have, it looks like this small little ugly thing, and they actually look down on us. So yeah.
Mangapoga Sonjiga Sushino Kara Sonjiga Street Yele Marawa Juarez. Sonjiga Street, the couple of the New York Marawas.
Right.
Kazi and Pass it to Rivondona, that Koya, Chipako.
And so this is, first we'll mention Modgalyayana, and Modgalyayana was one of the Shravaka disciples of the Buddha, and he was the disciple who was the most developed in miracle powers. And it is said that Modgalyayana, he was also like very tall and strong. He cut a very handsome figure, was very impressive. And anyways, there was a time where he was at the Buddha's teaching, and he had noticed how the Buddha's voice, he said in this days, those days we didn't have microphones and things. So the Buddha's voice was always loud enough to be able to reach the very last row of the people sitting listening. And so at one time there were many listeners, and so the Buddha's speech, it went to throughout all the rows of the audience, many paltsiks. So those are like kind of, it's a unit of measurement. So we can say like many, I don't know how much it is, many kilometers. And then it went sort of outside this world and went to other realms and was reaching beings who needed to listen there as well.
다 손지거든. 다 곧더니 리전다 칠랜드 딜로 사자 전다 칠 손지지가 수신오네 돼요. 수시.
So when the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha were penetrating one of these realms, one of these worlds, that particular world actually already had a Buddha, a fully enlightened being within it that was teaching. Right. So when Modgalyayana, he was curious about this, and he possessed these miracle powers. So he was able to journey to this realm, to this world. And, not so normally he already had this kind of like tall, strong body. But in this realm, the beings were very small. They were like almost looked like tiny little ants in comparison to him. So he kind of really developed a negative attitude and sort of looked down on them.
control the yares. Oh,
Ah.
that thing back get them with that. Did
Lungse, ale.
Right.
So he said that like them sort of walking around in the roads, I guess, of their world, it reminded him of ants that would sort of crawl along the side of his alms bowls. In other words, they were very tiny.
Oh, that is on the control to Jizo was. Punjuzo call Sunjiti Sujina Hamko Sujiar.
Yeah.
She's to Kilama Sunjiar was.
Los.
Taking Del Tunju Mazos. Zomberlin de la Majibin Zomberlin de la Sunjito de Loma, the Chichejo de Corradas.
Yeah, ale.
Monga Panzerjun.
Moga puzit.
Bumares.
Ale nga pek ko norswa such a jendag di koronso chasang wa butro manangshin du kongso mogaya yana butro manangshin. Oh goodness, I messed up big time. Sorry. So so the bodies of the beings were huge, much bigger than Mogayayana. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. So Mogayayana looked like a tiny ant walking around their alms bowls. I'm sorry. So it was the beings in this realm who were looking down on Mogayayana. But the Buddha of that world, who is not Shakyamuni, Geshe can't remember the name, but it was another Buddha. He said, this being, Venerable Mogayayana, he is one of the principal disciples of Shakyamuni, the Buddha of the other world system. So do not look down and disrespect him. I'm very sorry about that. So the idea is, that because of like their physical size or whatever they perceived in as their own qualities, they had looked down at Mogayayana, not realizing that he was this great being. So we should never look down or denigrate anybody, because we don't, no matter how humble they may seem, because we don't know what their hidden qualities might be. So this is a reason, because we don't know about what other qualities that person may possess that may be hidden. There's no reason to be prideful, to look down on, or to denigrate others. Right. So we see that, the beings of that other world system, because of their size, bigger than Mogayayana, who is usually like tall and strong, but they were much bigger than him. They actually looked down on him because of their perspective. But a being with true discernment, the Buddha of that land, who possessed perfect clairvoyance, he was able to see Venerable Mogayayana's quality, and therefore he scolded them, saying, do not denigrate this person.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that, but I think we got clear there with the story in the end. So Geshe would like to end it here, if you could. So thank you very much, everybody. Tashi Dele. And maybe we'll see you at Chokor Duchen tomorrow if you're free. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,